losers. And it's June, you know, and by the time it gets to June, the cops are pretty much all the same age. I'm going to do that, I can take this for a moment, trickles after
All right, it is 5:45. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to our regular board meeting of June 8th, 2026. We'll start with roll call.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
Abe Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart.
Here.
Rachel Henderson.
Here.
Dale Dahlke.
Here.
Emily Hines.
Here.
Michelle Dupree.
Here.
Angela Wolf.
Here.
Jay Edenworth.
Here.
We have a quorum. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And our mission statement. The school district of the Menominee area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda order? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to recommendations and commendations. Okay, first up, we have a commendation for Sarah Azarshin. Sarah serves as NAP's special education teacher and the district special education evaluator. She brings extensive knowledge and experience to her roles, consistently sharing effective strategies and resources to benefit both students and staff. Students are at the heart of everything Sarah does. She is flexible, dependable, and consistently goes above and beyond to meet the needs of our school community. Sarah also builds strong relationships with families and maintains open, ongoing communication to ensure student success. Sarah's dedication, compassion, and unwavering commitment have a lasting impact on our students, families, and staff. We're truly grateful to have her as part of our team.
Thank you.
For Stacy Lee, we are recognizing Stacy Lee as the Director of Academic Services for her leadership, adaptability, and dedication during the 25-26 school year. In addition to all her regular duties, Stacy served as Assistant Principal at Menominee Middle School, supporting students, staff, and administrators. Stacy also dedicated time to planning and coordinating the district's 2026 summer school program, ensuring students have engaging and meaningful learning opportunities. Her willingness to take on extra responsibilities, her positive attitude, and commitment to our schools exemplify the leadership that strengthens our district. We appreciate Stacy's contributions and ongoing service to our students and staff.
And Rachel, as long as we have a second, I would like to point out that we're happy to back to the cabinet. We really do appreciate that she was so flexible this year in providing additional support at the middle school. We had some absences and such. But we are looking forward to her work coming up here, the summer school program. I think we all know how huge our summer school program is. Also, we're already drafting our work plan for 2026, 2027, and we already have some ambitious goals that we're excited to share with the board throughout the summer. Stacey will be instrumental in those. So welcome back, Stacey.
There's a kid in my house who's very excited for summer school to start. Today.
I better give it a couple.
Fair. Next up, we have our June highlight on youth.
So presenting our highlight on youth tonight will be elementary principal from Knapp Elementary, Shannon Branch. Shannon, take it away.
Thank you for having me. Lots of great things to celebrate as we close out this school year. Starting off with Menominee High School, you'll notice that the Menominee FFA held its annual end-of-year banquet for students and families. Members of the Multicultural Club performed a traditional Hmong dance for the students during their lunch period. The MHS choirs and orchestras hosted their last concerts of the year. The music was outstanding, but they also took time to represent and recognize those graduating seniors of those programs. They also had their graduation commencement ceremony that just took place, and the graduates from 26 will be greatly missed. For the middle school, the choir had a performance over at the high school auditorium while the orchestra performed at the middle school gymnasium. The Multicultural Club had their annual end-of-the-year tie-dyeing shirt activity, as well as students participating in the Mighty Mustang track meet over at the MHS Sports Complex. They also recognized 6 students that had perfect attendance, which is exemplary. Over at Knapp, we had some special events with our 3rd graders, so I was able to attend one of their benchmark projects, so that's our ELA curriculum. They were working on expository how-to multimedia presentations, so it was really impressive to see all of the components that they learned how to add to their presentation through technology, from images, video clips, music, voiceovers, so it was really tremendous to see their work in action. They also had a geography fair in the spring where they researched about a specific country, usually aligned to their family culture, and were able to share those with the school body. And then we also offered an extended day for our graduating 5th graders. So we had a special time where we invited them and their families to come after school, and we utilized the Knapp Pond for fishing, played some yard games with their families, and also roasted s'mores. Over at Oaklawn, they celebrated the end of the year with their annual Fun in the Sun activity, and they were able to invite some MHS football players to come and lead those fun events. They also ended the day with a staff and students inflatable costume racing event. They also had their 5th graders head to the Como Zoo, and their interventionists were able to secure a book for every student in their school for the summertime. And then over at River Heights, 4th graders had a field trip where they went to Madison to see the state capitol, and they also participated in their Roadrunner Field Day event and were able to raise over $9,000 to support their PTO. And lastly, with Wakanda Elementary, their 5th graders went on an excursion as well. So they were able to go to the Ducks at the Wisconsin Dells, they toured the Arnold House, and they also went to the state capitol as well with meeting Senator Rob Stapsel. They also had a kid principal program, so Colin Seiler was able to celebrate his special day and help tremendously at recess for kindergarten. And they also hosted a kindergarten VIP day, a very important person day, where they could create some special moments with the students and their guests. Any questions?
Lots of great pictures in that one, so thank you very much for bringing that to us.
Thank you.
Before moving on, I'd like to point out, across the district, we also celebrated America 250. And Stacy Nelson is here, our school nutrition director. We had a special meal for all the students across the district, 4th of July themed, and we also had classroom activities. So those came the very last week of school, so probably too late to get into the highlight of youth report, but still everyone did a great job.
Next up, we'll move on to community communications. We have 2 speakers tonight. First is Josie Tillman.
within Nap, Wisconsin. Dr. Zadowski and members of the board. This month, a quiet yet powerful, positive movement continues to gain momentum. Fidelity Month, spearheaded by respected thinkers such as Dr. Robert George, is a national call to recommit ourselves to faith, family, and freedom. It's a movement that seeks not to divide or provoke, but to rebuild, to restore the moral foundations that have long undergirded our nation's strength. Fidelity in its truest sense means faithfulness, and not just in generic loyalty, but faithfulness to what is good, true, and right. In this instance, to God, to our families, and to our founding principles as a nation. In a cultural moment when those very allegiances are under sustained attack, Fidelity Month offers a timely and critical opportunity to remember, re-anchor, and recommit. So this June, while the world waves its rainbow flags, let's raise a different banner, the banner of fidelity. Let's affirm with conviction and love that we are faithful to God, to our families, and to the principles that make America worth loving. The time for fidelity is here. That was all a quote from Wisconsin Family Council. So this looks like a fine guiding principle to me for the SDMA as you rewrite your gender policy plan in your student handbook. You'll be looking at that sometime a little bit. Fidelity Month offers a timely and critical opportunity to remember, re-anchor, and recommit. Thank you.
And our second speaker tonight is Mike Cooper.
Mike Cooper, Menominee, Wisconsin. Good evening. Tonight I would like to offer you a very unique opportunity, which I will share in a minute. Since January, I put before you the option to celebrate the Declaration of Independence in this close with little interest shown on your part. Here's another option. First, I would like to speak to the topic of history. As mentioned in the previous meeting, and that the then candidates of the school board and now members mentioned the importance of teaching history. One member mentioned the importance of also teaching the bad history. Thing is, there is no bad history. There is no good history. There is just history. In all of history, bad things have happened, good things have happened. When you focus on one or the other, you are now in the realm of indoctrination. Efforts like critical race theory or Hitler's version of history are excellent examples of indoctrination. If you look at the history of critical race theory, you'll find that its inspiration comes from Karl Marx. Isn't that interesting? But good or bad, you decide. Or how about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire? Many a long career has been made out of arguing the good and bad of that empire. I would like to offer you the opportunity to think more positively about celebrating the country's 250th birthday. An opportunity for you to learn firsthand some of the history of the writing of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. It is an 8-part history class that discusses the good and the bad related to the creation of both of these documents. The course is called Biblical Citizenship. It is America's history. To ignore how the faith of the founding fathers impacted the writing is to ignore the major influence in both documents and in America itself. One of the greatest collections of documents of the era are used to build the course. I have been through it twice, and I'm still learning more about how brilliant these men and women were who worked together to forge our nation. You can go online and look at it yourself, and if you are interested, each class can handle up to 12 people. You can contact me and set up time, and we can present the course where it's 8 sessions at 2 hours each. I am convinced that after you see the course, your respect and admiration for the founders will be renewed. Christian or not, this is a valuable American history lesson. Thank you.
All right, then we will move on to revenue expenditure reports for the month ended May 2026.
All right, as usual, I'd like to start out with the revenue report. There's not a lot of significant changes in this report from last month. Continuing to make grant claims, and we'll be making final grant claims later this month and into July. So those numbers will increase before the close of the fiscal year. Looking at the expenditures by object report, travel and transportation continue to trend higher both last month and at the same point last year. Again, continuing to see an impact from fuel costs and instability in just the energy markets, which is contributing to higher transportation-related expenses. Finally, then looking at the expenditures by function, again, pupil transportation increased from approximately 80% of the budget in May last year to this year, now 86% in May, through May. Which is pacing then ahead of last year. So this aligns with the trends that we saw in the object report as well. So those are the main items that I wanted to highlight in those reports this month.
I would like to point out for the board, as Eric said, as we get to year end, you can see those percentages creeping up towards 100%. But like previous years, our staff members have done a great job staying within budget, staying under budget. Also, some of the changes that we made have significantly helped the district budget. Probably the one that comes to mind the most is the near-site clinic that we have. We've been able to save thousands of dollars through directing our service to the near-site clinic for lab work and things like that. So because of that, we are going to be watching that budget very closely over the next several weeks. And more likely than not, we will be coming to the board with some final year-end transfers like we have in previous years. Probably not as high as previous years, but we still want to take advantage of the state aid while we can. So you can expect that in the board agenda, end of June, definitely by the end of July.
Any other questions or discussion on the revenue and expenditure reports? Right, next up we have our monthly employment report for May 2026. This is an informational report. Questions or discussion? All right, moving along then. We can go up to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Heinz moves.
Second?
Motion by Emily, second by Abe. On the consent agenda tonight, we have approval of the minutes for the regular board meeting of May 11th, 2026. We have financial reports, general fund checks totaling $2,467,456.94, and cash receipts totaling $267,988.29. We have no donations exceeding $1,000 at this time. We also have approval of the student parent handbooks, the changes for which were reviewed at our last meeting, which are fairly minor. We have a renewal of our WIAA agreement, which is the same as it has been in previous years, and approval for a Menominee High School Washington DC trip request for October 2026. Any questions or discussion on anything on the consent agenda? Seeing none, let's vote. Motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have the personnel consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the personnel consent agenda. So moved. Second. Motion by Angie, second by Dominique. We have 4 resignations and 4 new hires tonight. I think I'm counting right. Any questions or discussion on the personnel consent agenda? All right, seeing none, let's vote. Motion passes unanimously. We have no action agenda items tonight, so we will move on to our discussion items. Our first up, discussion item is plans for the Downsville School site, for which we have a special guest tonight.
Thanks, Rachel, and I'll tell you, the next several items is gonna be like a baseball batting order, Amy. You're gonna love it. First, we have up Adam Akala from Dunn County, then we have Steve Thomas, then we have Stacy Nelson, and that's gonna be the rotating chair. But right now, we're talking about our options and ideas for the Downsville School site. Adam from Dunn County Economic Development was here a few weeks ago and shared some ideas. Since then, some progress has been made, and Adam, why don't you go ahead and fill us in and give us your suggestions, please?
Yeah, so thank you all for having me here tonight. So a few months ago, we discussed possible paths forward for the Downsville School and a potential redevelopment project for that. So with the blessing of the board, I went forward with soliciting quotes from 3 different organizations: Cedar Corp here locally, Redevelopment Resources located in the Wausau area of Wisconsin that specializes in redevelopment projects, and ISG, another architecture firm. Of the 3, we did receive responses from 2 of them, Cedar Corporation and Redevelopment Resources being the 2 of them. Those should have been distributed to all of you for your review, so I won't go kind of through them in detail, but a couple of the things that kind of stood out to me that I wanted to just point out for the board were the approach to the highest and best use market analysis. So Redevelopment Resources, this is really where they shine in the work that they do. This is kind of their bread and butter. They really dig into the demographic market data of what the highest and best use would be of that property to be the most beneficial to the community, to make a project for a potential developer to come in to make that project pencil, and to make sure that the fit of what would be proposed in that highest and best use analysis would be in alignment with any comprehensive plans that the town of Dunn or Dunn County might have. As we're talking about things like idle sites grants from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, this type of narrative analysis is really important to show kind of that economic impact that can warrant an idle sites grant from WEDC. Cedar Corp did take a little bit of a lighter approach to this particular aspect of it, with kind of a purchase, a broker opinion of value through NAI Company located out of Eau Claire. And so this would be more of just a valuation of the property and a little bit less of the highest and best use analysis that was kind of requested. On the environmental site assessment, the Phase 1 ESA, this is where Cedar really shines in kind of their engineering, their analysis of a particular parcel, and the ability to say what could be done feasibly and environmentally on that particular site. Redevelopment Resources is looking to bring in a contractual partner for this. Cedar has those resources in-house. On the community engagement side, Redevelopment Resources offers kind of that streamlined single event approach and all rolled into one price point for that. Hosting one public house to present opinions and gather some feedback on that upfront part. Cedar offered kind of an a la carte menu of different options where there's a website, there's a survey, there's an open house and a community forum. So a couple of different options to gather that community input from Cedar's lens. So those were a couple of the things that kind of stood out to me in terms of the proposals that were presented and kind of where they differed. For the idle sites grant that I mentioned before, I did a little bit of digging into that. What we would have to look at for that is Dunn County applying on behalf of the school district or on behalf of the developer to receive those funds and act as a pass-through entity. I did reach out to the county and they are supportive of at least starting that conversation. They can't guarantee any necessary board approval, but they'd be interested in having that conversation and we would be supportive of the school district pursuing an idle sites grant for this. On that grant, the process takes about 6 months from application to actual distribution of funds. So approximately 1 to 3 months of work on that application itself, followed by about 8 weeks to get the contract underwritten and signed by WEDC and appropriate staff here at the local level, and then about another month for distribution of funds. once the application is accepted, they initiate a project start date. The project start date, we want to be very careful to align also with our environmental site assessment, because those only have a lifespan of 6 months, 12 months if we're updating along the way. So that's a consideration of timeline, is we've got about a 6-month process for the Idle Sites Grant, we've got about a 6-month expiration date on our environmental site assessment. One of the biggest decisions, I think, is that highest and best use analysis. Redevelopment Resources will give us kind of deep, data-heavy economic study. We would be getting kind of that opinion of value from Cedar Corp. Because the Idle Sites Grant application requires that we prove the economic and community development potential of the project, Redevelopment Resources' heavier data approach might give the eventual grant application a bit more oomph behind it. But if we feel confident in writing that narrative ourselves based on the studies that we have, the county's comp plan being one of them that's being updated now, we could approach that a little bit differently with the grant itself. I mentioned the timeline. Cedar also offering that flexibility for community engagement. I think we look at those different elements and see if we don't like about that, we can kind of pick and choose what we want to do. And ultimately, it boils down to core strengths. We've got Redevelopment Resources that really excels in redevelopment projects like this, and we have Cedar that really excels in the analysis of the building itself, the physical ground that it's on, and the environment around it. So there are a few different paths forward, accepting either one of these proposals kind of as is, plucking out individual elements and going with pieces and parts, or asking the two organizations to potentially work together and see what the possibility of a collaborative effort on this would be. So, I guess I will kind of open it up to questions from the board as far as anything that you've reviewed and see where we go from there.
Just to set the stage a little bit more before we get down that road. So the previous discussion essentially said that there were kind of 3 options. One was just to basically unload it. 2 was to do what we're talking about today. And 3 would be a more in-depth development. Is that a simplified way of saying kind of what our 3 options were?
Yes.
And this is kind of door number 2.
Yep, this would set up door number 2 of essentially building the business case for a purchaser to come in and know exactly what they could do feasibly with the property, as opposed to just putting it on the open market and hoping somebody purchases it with the intention of doing something good and non-competitive with the school district and also beneficial to the community of Dunstable.
And then just to finalize the setup, door number 1, choice number 1 of really just listing and selling it, really probably not really any cost to the school district.
Not aside from any percentage of commission fees that we pay to a real estate broker.
This one, we're looking at both proposals around $20,000, so that'd be our investment. And then the third option was much more, which we're not really talking about.
More capacity and time, but not that one.
Okay, so that kind of sets the stage for the second option, which we're talking about here tonight.
Am I remembering correctly though, that when we discussed that third option, I thought that I remembered that sort of this process was also a first step if we did want to go down that road, right? Like, kind of regardless if we went to door number 2 or 3, we would need these assessments, is that correct? So moving forward here doesn't necessarily mean selecting 2 or 3 at this point. Those are both still open to us. Got it.
You got it.
You mentioned that Redevelopment Resources they always contract out the environmental and development assessments specifically, or is that correct?
I'm not sure if always, but they don't have an in-house staff.
They don't have in-house. So it's potentially plausible they would contract with Cedar anyway, as being a local firm that does that, or could we encourage you so?
Yeah, we could definitely encourage that. They do have a preferred provider that they mentioned in here, but we could definitely ask.
I was curious, because it seems like based on these 2 proposals, that you kind of indicated this, like they're kind of addressing different topics, right?
But it sounds like you're saying it wouldn't be unheard of to sort of combine that or to pick and choose, or, you know, to go with one for that economic kind of market assessment and go with the other for the environmental assessment. Is that kind of consistent with what you're saying?
Yeah, we could definitely ask. We could also ask them if they would be willing to come to present to the school board or do some sort of a virtual interview with the school board, just to get a little bit more kind of background on them and gauge their willingness to potentially partner together on it.
On the map from redevelopment resources on page 9 of their packet, there's a site just southeast of Dunn County off of the river. You happen to know what site that might be?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I could find out.
I'm curious, because that's the only one that's, reasonably close and then we could do some background research on.
Yeah.
A lot of their work is in the eastern part of the state and across the country, but there are fairly few sites in western Wisconsin. Dale and Michelle, do you have questions?
I didn't know, thank you.
Could be interesting to take up that site that you mentioned.
What kind of information or decision would you need from us tonight to move forward?
I would say if there are specific pieces of information that you feel like are missing from either proposal, I can return to both of them and request those pieces of information. If you would like to set up some sort of a meeting, either in a small group or with the full board, we can request that for an upcoming school board meeting. Or we would like to accept or reject any proposal, we can also do that.
I noticed in your original email that it said that there was another proposal that might be coming, ISG.
Yes, yeah, ISG did not submit a proposal by last Friday.
Okay, and was that like a deadline that they had to meet, and if it didn't meet it, then they're out?
Not necessarily, I could still pass it along, but the deadline was primarily to make sure that you all received it in advance of tonight's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I would just suggest that Adam go back, talk to both groups about the potential of working together, and then between him and I, we could bring you a recommendation for your consideration at the next board meeting of moving forward, with this option number 2. In the meantime, then determine any future steps after that.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to verify, you know, that both groups would be willing to contract for sort of portions of this work or, you know, potentially work together. And also like make sure, you know, what you said about timing sounds important, like we should definitely be not starting the environmental assessment until we're well done with the kind of market analysis. And then, we do not have in our background, did we have it in our background last time, the Dunn County Comprehensive Plan you alluded to? That might be something that's useful for the board to have a gander at, I guess.
Yes, they should be completing that in the next couple of months here.
Okay.
And so it's in process right now, but there have been drafts before the Planning Resources and Development Committee that would give us a pretty good idea of kind of what we're looking at for it, so I can see if I can rustle those up.
Sure. When was the last time that the county did one, do you know?
It would have been 10 years ago.
Okay.
So the plans are for 20 years and they're renewed every 10.
Okay, so it will be worth it to wait for the new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, great.
What sort of collaboration would be necessary to work with the county for the application to the state grant system? Would we just say, have at it, or how much shoulder to shoulder work coordination has to happen?
Yeah, I would imagine that it would be up to myself, Superintendent Zadowski, and the school board to kind of draft a copy for the grant. And so I could kind of take a crack at that initially, get it to Joe here, bring it to the board for approval, and then the county would ultimately be the applicant of it. They may be able to provide some of the writing assistance in areas that are asking for specific county data, but I think a lot of the writing lift would be on myself and us.
It appears to require the Board of Supervisors of the county to approve sending that application to the state, right?
Yep, yes.
So there might be some intergovernmental discussion to happen there as well. Okay.
Do you think it's appropriate to wait for that, best use, best and highest use analysis, whatever you call it, before we started that conversation with the county board of supervisors, or is that a step we should be taking concurrently?
That's a good question. I would say that we would probably want to start the conversation as early as possible to ensure that we have a path for the application to move forward. Once that highest and best use analysis is kind of drafted, we could look at what's proposed and say, this is an opportunity for the county to partner on affordable housing, on light industrial incubator space, on micro retail, whatever that kind of analysis determines, and see if that is a compelling story for the county. Ultimately, there's not a ton of lift on the county's part in submitting that application. It's just the reporting requirements, and then they'd be required to do the scheduled expenditures audit with the WEDC. We did one last year for our small business development grant that ran us $2,500, that we took out of our economic development budget. So it's not a huge monetary expense, and so that might be one of the sticking points where we just talk about who's covering that scheduled expenditures audit cost, and then go from there.
So you're talking about the timeline of the work of doing the highest and best use analysis, and then the environmental analysis, working with the county, getting to the state, getting the grant back, et cetera. It sounds like you have maybe a fuzzy but clarifying timeline in mind. How does that match up with the timeline that Redevelopment Resources proposes in some of the last 1 or 2 pages of their presentation?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have the information you need to kind of sketch out, like, here's a rough idealized timeline of the different steps that would have to happen?
Yes, so with the highest and best use analysis, that will essentially determine our project scope. That's kind of the most important part for the idle sites grant. Once we have that, we can start kind of the pre-vetting process for that grant, where they would tell us whether this is a viable project to move forward. Then we start the application for the idle sites grant. Concurrently, we could be finishing up the process with Redevelopment Resources and or Cedar Corp to identify a developer. And then once the application is moving through the process with the idle sites grant, a developer gets kind of slotted in. So it wouldn't be a tool that we could necessarily package along with this project and say, we have an idle sites grant, but we can say it's something that we are actively pursuing for this project, and we hope that a partnership with the developer in the end would ultimately result in the receipt of this idle sites grant. So I would say we're probably looking at like a spring to early summer of next year for ideal kind of developer identification, idle sites grant receipt, and start of the project.
So how about if Adam and I, again, develop a recommendation which would include a timeline beyond the timeline submitted by the proposals? Kind of a what? More comprehensive timeline.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I wanted to add one question. So when you go back to Redevelopment Resources and Cedar Corp, I am interested because in Redevelopment Resources timeline, they have that stakeholder engagement in the very beginning, right? In kind of concurrent with their analysis of the demographic, geographic, and economic data, also doing that stakeholder engagement. And I would be curious to know if they are open to including multiple ways, or multiple sort of, we mentioned that Cedar Core has maybe a kind of a whole list or menu of ways to do that stakeholder engagement, whereas redevelopment resources is sort of like just got the one. I'd be interested to know if redevelopment resources is open to adding in more, or potentially like exploring multiple ways of getting that engagement.
Excellent, I can ask
In other words, yeah, like if we can't get everybody in one room at one time, how else are we going to get folks to, or can we use other ways to get input? Thank you. Any other questions for Adam? Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
All right, with that, I will give a minute for the seat shuffling because our annual energy report is up next.
So Steve Thomas is our district energy manager. As you have heard Steve before, he's a jack of all trades. He has done a great job working with our systems, and because of his great work, we continue to have terrific success managing our energy and really maximizing the investments that we have in our school district. So Steve, thank you for the report. The board has read the report, and go ahead, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Sadowski. Thank you. Through last year, we have made measurable progress in reducing energy consumption, improving building efficiency, and controlling operating costs. With this, we have been able to stay under the district average for the last 6 years in energy and natural gas usage. You can see that on page 2. Through everybody's help and commitment, we were able to keep our prices down, keep our costs down, and move forward throughout the year with staying below our average line. The middle school solar panels are still working up to what we thought they would. We have had no problems with them. They're 100 kilowatt solar panel, and they're helping keeping our energy consumption down. In the district, we're continually looking into new and affordable ways to keep the district's consumption down, from solar panels to equipment upgrades, the latest and greatest technology that's coming out. Thank you.
Steve, could you also share with the board a couple examples of how you manage the programming behind everything?
Yes, it's pretty a complicated system. We actually have 3 different systems combined in between our schools. So one school is not even close to what the next school is. So it's a big kind of a game a person has to play to be able to make these schools all run right. And I treat these schools as individuals. They have their own personalities, and you gotta really watch them to make them operate correctly.
All that. We're lucky to have someone who can play that game and manage all of those schools. To that point, I really appreciated the breakdown of the energy use of all the different buildings. That was fascinating to see. And yeah, I mean, it's just so great to see us improving that efficiency year over year, and yeah, really grateful for all your work. Other questions or discussion for Steve on the energy report? All right, well, thanks so much. Oh, go ahead.
We can't let him off the hook.
Okay, yeah.
Before you go, could you maybe, like I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we're working on our work plan for next year, and we do have strategic goals of operation and efficiencies. As you look at all these buildings with their own personalities, and you think of our school district as a whole, are there any opportunities that you'd like to share with the board for future improvement for our facilities?
Yes, there's, between all of our schools, we have plenty of room for improvement. We're getting close to the point now with the age of our equipment to how we can maximize our efficiency. We will probably, in time, we'll have to look at probably upgrading some controls. We have some controls that are still being used at the high school that were put in there kind of originally. We're slowly working on getting them changed out. We're looking at things in the 30-year plan as far as ages of pumps and bearings and things of that nature in our heating system and our cooling systems. So we're constantly kind of keeping an eye on what might be coming down the road in the future and the cost of that.
And I know that Steve and then also Kevin Tomaszewski, you guys hear from Kevin, our Director of Buildings and Grounds. Just a few of the things that we've talked about, in addition to what Steve just mentioned, LED lighting. We're definitely ahead of the game in LED lighting, but there's still some opportunities in our school district that could reduce energy. Also, we do have the solar array at the middle school. That is something that, we have done some initial studying about potential expansion of solar arrays. A building the size of the high school could be a good opportunity for a solar array. And then, like Steve said, just some of the programming and controls. We have buildings that have been very well maintained, but despite that, when we look at a building like the high school, where you have an original building that was added onto with 2 major renovations, there definitely is opportunity there. So we'll continue to study, we'll continue to bring the board recommendations, and we'll continue to update the 30-year plan each year with an eye on trying to be energy efficient.
If I remember correctly, the middle school smart panels were put in about 6 years ago, is that right, something like that? I'm curious, not tonight, but it would be interesting to look back at the original estimates of savings when they were first proposed, and I'm guessing we've actually beaten them based on the energy price and everything else. It'd be interesting to look back at the original proposal for that system, and then look forward to see how we're doing compare that estimate at some point. If we're looking at further expansion to get the better perspective.
I think that'd be a great project for Steve to work on before next year's report, maybe a mid-year report. But I think that's a really good point, Nate. I think we should definitely do that. I think if memory serves me right, the payback on those was going to be about 8 years. So we should be hitting that if we haven't already.
Okay. All right, any final questions or discussion? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And moving along, next up in the hot seat is Stacy Nelson with our school nutrition report.
Yeah, Stacy's done a great job for us, her whole team. This being the last day with staff members, the last day with students was Friday. And Stacy and her team, how many meals did you serve this past year? I know it's in your report.
Well, it's just preliminary through May. We served 540,000 breakfasts and lunches about, if I'm rough mathing correctly. And last year during summer, we served 40,000 meals probably.
Wow.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, just to kind of summarize what I submitted, first and foremost with those numbers, the team are really the ones that we need to thank. So I am so thankful for the team and everyone that supports us. A couple other things that I did want to highlight is the average daily participation. I noted that it went down, and I just wanted to kind of explain how those numbers are determined. So it is determined based off of enrollment and the number of meals that we are serving. So if you actually were to look at like an average attendance number instead of enrollment, our percentages jumped to 56.8% for breakfast and then 74.3% for lunch. And that was just using like the average daily attendance of May. So that was just kind of a snapshot of all of them, but I did want to point that out. And then I did want to mention our summer meal program will be starting next week, and we will continue serving out of the high school and also River Heights, but we're also adding another site of Oakland with the partnership with the Y. So that will have meals available on Friday when summer sessions aren't happening, and then during the weeks of the big break. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to capture some more families that that need those meals.
Will those be breakfast and lunch?
Yes, so it is from 8 to 8:45 for breakfast and then 12 to 12:45 for lunch, so a little window for them to get that. Our Fort Farms hydroponic, which we grow our own lettuce in, we were able to expand to 3 more towers this school year with the help of Mrs. Schmidt and her students and Mr. Weber at River Heights. So it's exciting, and I'm always trying to scope out where I can add more. So if a teacher is interested, let me know. So this year we were able to grow cucumbers, grape tomatoes. We did a staff appreciation event, and we were able to grow plants for them in that. And then of course the lettuce that is known for. The Angel Fund program, I know that we've been talking more about that, just because the need is there, but I thought it was fun to kind of figure out how many meals we have been able to provide for families, and that total based off of donations and our current meal pricing was 41,711 meals. So that's awesome. This year we started a new joint meal agreement. So what that essentially means is we're preparing meals for another site, which was with St. Joe's School. Mrs. Kiefer, she told us that, her quotes exactly, "Our hot lunch program is so much more successful thanks to you and your team. We are grateful for your partnership with the district." So we will continue to provide that for them next school year. A financial overview, that is just very preliminary, and then to talking about the paid lunch equity. So that is in place. I was trying to explain it so everyone remembers why and how it works. So that is in place so that the federal programming funds for students that qualify for free or reduced meals, that those funds aren't covering the expense of paid students. And so our meal pricing is very low, especially in the area. And we continue to see our prices increasing. So with a lot of thought and consideration, and we now have like delivery fees because of fuel costs that we've never had before. I am recommending an increase of 25 cents for lunch prices. That would put the meal prices for K through 5 at $2.75 each and 6 through 12 at $2.85 each. This is still going to be less than what we were pre-COVID. We were $2.80 pre-COVID for elementary and $2.90 for the high school. And then if you look at the CISA 11 schools and what their pricing is, it's averaging anywhere from $2.84 for elementary to $3.09, or the average was, I took the average. So there's quite a wide span, and our meal prices are low. Some of my peers around the state are like, how are you doing that? So that is my recommendation, and I believe it is an action item for the next board meeting. Staffing, we had some shortages. I'm happy that we filled our middle school position that has been vacant for a really long time. She will be starting with us for next school year. So I'm happy to report I have one position that we'll be hiring for. So that's really exciting for us. And then over the summer, we're gonna be working on implementing student-based meal accounts with Skyward. So this kind of helps with the different family dynamics that we're seeing. And it will also help with the new parent square communication. So it will automatically send those notifications out. Right now, I have to run a report to do it, otherwise it doesn't happen. So that's exciting. And then we're also gonna be implementing new nutritional software. We have an intern starting with us at the end of June that will help us in implementing that from the Scout Dietetic internship. And then this morning, we finished moving out all of the things at Oakland, and that cooler and freezer is going in, and Miss Sally is so excited. She has been sending me picture updates. And then as always, our some of our goals is to increase our scratch and semi-scratch foods. With staffing, it makes it difficult, but we're always looking at ways to do that. And then local food purchases, I've been talking with St. Croix Valley Farm Alliance, and we are going to be working with a farmer to get some fresh produce in starting this summer. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Stacy or discussion on the school nutrition report? There's a lot of information in here, so thank you.
I just wanted to, it's not really a question because I know the answer, but I just wanted the public, I guess, to know that when you have your meals in the summertime, it's anybody 18 and under and they don't have to be enrolled in summer school, is that correct?
Correct, so anyone 18 and younger can come and get meals, they don't have to be in summer school, it's open to the community, they can go to, any of the sites. And so if you have kids from out of town that are here that aren't part of the district, they can come as well.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful service.
Okay, Michelle, any questions?
Well, that was great report.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
I know it is hard to request the increases, but I do appreciate the approach we're taking of it being gradual and not a huge jump over time. This is one of my favorite reports, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I was gonna say the same thing, so I just wanted to maybe bring us back to what we'll have to vote on. It is always, it's so nice when you come to us and say we don't have to increase, but I understand that every single thing in the world costs more. I appreciate the incremental approach. And it's really, I appreciate the math you did in figuring out that number of meals served via the Angel Fund. And I'm glad that's been successful. And not that we are here to appreciate the board, but I want to just mention that we've had the idea of working with the Community Foundation to get the online donations, and it seems like that has been a really huge benefit. So we'll keep making sure we get people donating to that.
Yeah, and I've written for a couple grants too that we've received, and I have hoping that we'll get another one, so.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for all your work on that.
Thank you.
I think we're set. Thank you so much. Okay, who is up next? Oh, all right. Shift it, we'll turn our seats a little bit. Next up, we have our student wellness within the multi-level systems of support report.
All right, good evening. So our school-based mental health team consists of our school social worker, our school counselors, our school psychologist, and behavior interventionist. As you can see in my report, I did kind of outline the different roles that they play, although some of those roles kind of intermix and they work together, supporting students, families, and staff within our buildings. They do have kind of distinct roles that they serve as they serve. And I won't read all of those with you. They actually work then collaboratively with our community-based mental health providers. So we invite some of our community-based mental health providers to, if they so choose and have clients within our buildings, we develop an MOU with them so that they can serve the students within our school buildings. That does help our families, so our families don't have to pick up their child, take them to an office for therapy, and then bring them back to school. They can do that within our school buildings. And our community agencies that we partner with do ebb and flow throughout the year, because if they don't have a client or they get a client, so that they can, sometimes they see more students in one year than the next. If they don't have students right now at the beginning of the year, and all of a sudden in December, they have clients, they reach out to me, we develop that MOU at that time. I would say space is probably the biggest barrier. However, many of our staff members are willing to give up an office space so that the child can receive therapy. And then also, what we're very proud of is our partnership with UW Scout and the Scouts Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program. We utilize their interns, that they do a placement with us. And this last year, the interns saw 44 students, which is great. So that is a free service They are interns in that program, so they're not necessarily licensed yet. But for those 44 students, it is a free service for them. And then I listed some of our community-based organizations that we work with. We work collaboratively with Dunn County, on lots of different committees to help support our students and our families. And then I won't read through all of these, so I kind of talked about the tiered level of support at our elementary, in our middle school, and high school. As you know, tier 1 is supports for all students. Tier 2 would be a smaller number of students, but kids that receive tier 1 supports but maybe need a little bit more, we add that layer of a tier 2 support. And tier 3 is really more individualized support for students.
Tony, I'm sorry to interrupt. Dale Dahlke just texted, he got cut off.
Oh, no.
Could you try to reconnect him, please, Dave? Tony, you can take a breath and drink of water.
Gail, you're back? Thank you. Yeah, wait 1 second. Michelle, are you there?
Yeah.
And Gail, are you there? Yeah. All right, great, we're back.
Thanks, Gail.
I'm not sure where I last failed.
You can start after tier 3.
So tier 3 is kind of more of that, again, it's that the student that maybe needs more individualized plan. And then I listed some of our community resources. So that was kind of a quick overview of, again, there's lots of different things that are in this report, but does anybody have any questions?
I was curious how these roles have changed over time.
Yep.
And like, are there needs shifting based on kind of what kind of maybe expectations were 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, so so previous to my role, I was joking earlier, like today, I was like 3 years ago, but it's 30, we just had to check the 0 off, because I can't believe it's been that long. Started off as a school psychologist. I would say back when I was trained, the role has changed significantly. And it isn't necessarily anything that we have done, it's the system itself has changed. I would say even like how we identify students in special ed, the criteria has changed. Given, even a specific learning disability, it was more just testing. Now we have response to intervention, looking at data, looking at progress monitoring. DPI right now, this is all for school psychologists, DPI is very into comprehensive evaluations. I would say the evaluation report from when I started 3 years ago to now is probably tripled in size. So, I mean, it is different, the systems are different, I think kids are different, the needs and kind of some mental health needs of students is different. So I would say the roles of all of these individuals have changed. Even look at our behavior interventionists, those are new positions. We did not have those, I didn't even think 10 years ago, we probably didn't even think about having those, and now that we're demonstrating the need, or students are demonstrating the need for them. I think Act 20 created a new role for many of these individuals as well, as they're supporting students within that, although they are helping families navigate some of that data that's being sent to families and talked about. So I would say yes, have the roles changed? Yes. Is it anything we have done locally that has kind of made those changes? I don't necessarily think it's anything we've done. I think it's a whole system, a state system, a country system of how we're utilizing these positions.
And I guess this is maybe too open-ended of a question, but I'm curious, if these trends kind of continue, these roles continue to shift, is there more or less emphasis on different types of roles that you foresee a few years down the line as we look at, looking at hiring and how jobs turn over, and how licensure affects people's roles?
Yep.
Like, should we expect?
That's a magic question.
Yeah, it's
Well, and if you don't mind me hopping in,
Yeah.
Tonya, it is something we talk about in our leadership meetings. Part of the issue are the pressures that society has right now of providing basic services for people. Healthcare would probably be the number one example, especially when we talk about mental health. When people don't have options in the community, or they can't afford options, places like your public schools, like your emergency rooms, like your food shelters,
Human services.
all that.
Yeah.
The amount of pressure that gets put on these other entities is immense, because it has to come from, services have to come from somewhere. And as we see that happening across society, we feel it. And we've talked about Jamie Vollmer's list before of all the things school districts are responsible for. Again, I just encourage people to take a look at that list and see how the expectations for schools has changed. And what Tony's talking about, will be right at the top.
But I think every year we talk about where are we, what are the needs of the students, how can we shift and change? So that's a conversation we kind of have every year as we look at the needs of students, so.
And can I just mention too that we have gotten creative when we haven't been able to, find someone that fits exactly what we're looking for. We look at those responsibilities and see if there's other licensure that can also help with some of the responsibilities of that position. So we have done that in the past, and we always try to be very flexible, but still get the support that we need for our students and our staff.
Yeah, as mentioned in tier 3, is there a way that we can look at family involvement or feedback within tier 1 for all the different levels? Instead of, do you know what I'm saying, instead there's escalation where families are involved in a tier 3 situation, if there's a way to kind of, and I know teachers do a great job in getting to know their families in the schools, but just, is that just a
Yeah,
solution
I think-
within tier 1 that we're engaging families?
I think just because it's not noted, I think family involvement, would be involved in all tiers, because, that's where you're serving all students, meaning all students, all families, and that's kind of tier 1, so I could, next time I get this report, I can emphasize that a little bit more.
Like, for example, I can think of certain times when I've been in a parent-teacher conference, right, where maybe the main goal is academic, but we're certainly talking about behavior, and we're talking about social emotional learning, how they're fitting in the classroom and things like that, right? Like, that's happening.
Yeah.
It's just not captured here, right? I think.
Yeah, I mean, just noting that, what's happening, that it does escalate.
Right.
Michelle, Dale, any questions?
Nope, just more of a, look. Cool. Okay.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, it's more of a comment, but I was noticing the behaviors last slideshow, the interventions put together, for classroom teachers, and they are phenomenal. I'm really impressed with those, and I'm wondering if you've heard any feedback on them.
On the behavior interventionist?
The blast.
Yes, that is, I would say, the feedback I've gotten is that they wish they could do more, kind of, that they feel that, they can have a great impact on getting into those classrooms and helping teachers, so that teachers can help their students, instead of pulling a student out and helping one student, helping a teacher can really help all those students within a classroom setting, so, it's almost like, this is a little bit, but we wish we could do more.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic, and there's a value there also, because then the teacher can carry that on for the next time, so it really should, it will impact many students, not just this particular year, so it's impressive. I just want to compliment your team on that.
Okay. Michelle, I'm gonna get Dale back in just a moment.
I was gonna ask a quick question while you connect it, I think it'll be fine. A couple of years ago when you gave this report, I know we spent some time talking about like the, shortage of community-based mental health resources available, and like there was, you were seeing, you were seeing way more need than there was support for. Has that improved?
I think it's improved. Previous, like years ago, wait lists were months and months and months. I'm not necessarily hearing that from families. They're able to get in. Sometimes it's insurance, like it's for their insurance based, and the place they need to go to might be a longer wait list. That's just kind of there. But there are, I think, are a little bit more community providers and then our providers are able to hire additional people as well. So that has gotten better, yes.
That's great news, thank you.
I have a kind of silly question from tier 2. I think we know what one caring adult is, but what does the starfish student mean?
That is about the connecting each like student with an adult.
Like they're the same kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Certain schools call it different, so.
Relationship mapping.
Yes,
I'm guessing maybe too, like maybe that's like an elementary.
yes, that's this.
Got it, thanks.
Any other questions?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to echo what Michelle said a moment ago, that these weekly or the daily, the last, they're great. I looked through several of them, like I learned things just slide by slide, like, wow, I should start doing that. It was great, so yeah, these are really phenomenal.
I just wanted to ask really quickly, when we looked at the monthly employment report, it looked like there were a number of special education paras who were leaving at the end of the year, and I wanted to know if you had a sense of, it had seemed to me, and I didn't go back and look, but like over the course of the year that there was a little less turnover than we've seen in previous years. And I was just wondering if this was like unexpected, or how you, what do you think that means for like coming years?
I can take that too. Yeah, it does appear to be that we had less turnover this year than we have in previous years. And in fact, I think Katie even mentioned last week that it was nice that any of our paras, or most of them that were resigning, actually stayed on through the end of the year. It just makes it a lot easier for a lot of different reasons, but specifically for the technology department. And so we're really working hard to make sure that we're looking for people that are a good fit for the positions, so that turnover, goes down. And then a number of other things that we're continuing to work on, like our para-mentoring program, and some of the other pieces, I guess, that we have in place. So, in my report, my HR report is at the next meeting, and so those numbers should reflect that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I also noticed that 2 of those resignations are early resignations because they fill positions full-time certified. So that's kind of cool too, that we can kind of grow our own in a way.
Yeah, we were thrilled for that to happen, so absolutely, we don't always like losing those people as paras because they do a great job, but when we know that they do a great job and feel confident that they're gonna also transition into great teachers, we are very happy to move them into those positions.
Yeah, that's wonderful to see. Any final questions or discussion on the MLSS report? Alright, thank you so much. This was another wonderfully informative report, so I appreciate all the work that went into it. Next up, we have a review of our preliminary budget for 2026-27.
Okay, so tonight I'm presenting the 26-27 preliminary budget. The usual disclaimer, this is not a final budget. There are some things that we know, there are many things that we do not. But my goal is to give the board an overview of major assumptions, projected revenues and expenditures, what the levy impact will be, and the long-term financial outlook. So Fund 10 revenues is what we'll start out with. They're projected to be around $47.7 million. While Fund 10 expenditures are projected to be at approximately $48.2 million. So this will result in a deficit, a preliminary budget deficit of around $470,000. The deficit reflects a combination of just operating cost increases, increases in special ed, open enrollment, transportation, utilities, insurance, and just support for long-term capital improvement needs that are needed in the district. If you take a look at the assumption page that I had in as one of the reports, some of the assumptions that I have used is a slight lowering of membership based on cohort survival rate or historical attendance, or I'm sorry, the historical membership. An increase in per pupil aid, which has been the past few years at $742. A special ed reimbursement rate at 39.5%. These are what experts say that we should probably use for this upcoming school year. A reminder, it is supposed to be at 45%, but that's kind of where it's coming, the projection is coming in, at least right now. Federal funding for Title I reduced by 11%, or to our district around $60,000. As I explained before, statewide, the state of Wisconsin has, I guess, moved down the list as far as need for federal funding. So this is more of a statewide issue rather than a Menominee reduction. So there's a lot of other districts in the state that are also having that Title I reduced, sometimes even by a greater amount than the 11%. And then an open enrollment regular education base fee increased by $928 or 9.2%. That sounds like a good thing, but remember our open enrollment is going out is more than what is coming in, so it's actually results in a loss for our district. So yeah, those are the assumptions that I did, and again, the assumptions around $470,000 deficit. Moving ahead to the levy analysis, that was another report that I had. So the total preliminary levy is projected to be at approximately $19.1 million. This is an increase of about 1.4%. With that, however, the mill rate decreases slightly from $5.60, which we had this year, to a projected $5.54 per $1,000 of equalized value. So this is based on a projected growth then of equalized property valuation. So even though our levy is going up, our mill rate is going down because of, again, that projection of the property values in our district going up, although increasing at a less rate than some of the other parts of the state. We're below the state average when it comes to equalized valuation. So all in all, the district remains in a strong financial position. The forecast does show structural pressure in some future years. Continuing monitoring and planning will be important. The voucher impact as well is going to be an issue. I'm projecting an increase there of approximately 23%, and that will reach, this year it was about 1.4 million, projecting then it to reach 1.7 million. So that also increases that local levy as well. I didn't want to go through every form that I submitted to you, but I wanted to provide you with major themes, the overall financial picture, and I'm happy also to answer any questions that you would have related.
Does the levy analysis on that last sheet you referenced, the 13.789, does that include the voucher number?
Yeah.
Sorry, grabbed it.
Yep. And one handy thing to look at is you look at the revenue worksheet on the right side. So if you even look at the one for this year, the one projected for next year, I believe it's item 10 and items H and I is where those voucher increases are put into the formula. So that increases our total amount that we can levy, and then the state equalization aid comes in, and then that 13.7 is what is levied at the local level.
Thanks.
But just to reemphasize, this is a very preliminary budget. We will be bringing it back to the board for consideration for then publishing for the annual meeting in August. But until we have our third Friday count in September, until we get our certified valuations, state aid, all that stuff, this is all very, very preliminary. So it will change.
David, Michelle, do you have questions? Bill? Michelle?
No, thanks.
I have one additional question. In the Baird forecast model with the graphs, the bar graphs, toward the bottom, there's the referendum debt levy and the recurring, non-referendum lines near the bottom. We've been looking previously with Baird at like the drop off of some of those older referendum numbers I'm curious, is that actually reflected here? Because these out of 2031 seem pretty stable.
So, one of my assumptions was that,
Hang on just 1 second, which document are you talking about?
I'm looking at this one.
What is it called?
It's called 26-27 preliminary budget projection summary R.pdf.
Projection summary R. Okay, thank you. Now go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt, but.
Sure.
The top left it says Baird budget forecast model. So yeah, I
Thank you.
apologize. There's a lot of attachments. Thank you for your diligence. Yeah, so you previously talked about how the how previous debt service on the levy affects the mill rate, and how there might be a rapid change in the mill rate if we don't have a look at that in the coming years. So I was just curious if this projection includes that drop off or not. And you indicate that you kind of assume there's gonna be some sort of stability happening.
correct, yeah, so if there was none of that assumed stability, it would go down into the $4, yes, it would drop down, yes. So I was assuming in those years some sort of stableness, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, you're good.
Additional questions or discussion? I also want to say thank you for all the work on this. I realize how much has to go into that, and
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And also, as usual, for putting it into a format that we can all figure out. I mean, I think, obviously it doesn't feel good to be looking at a preliminary budget that projects a deficit. That said, I just want to acknowledge that with the amount of external pressure, right, that we're feeling on this, that we're not getting that special ed reimbursement that was actually what was passed by the legislature, that we're not seeing these per pupil aid increases that would match inflation. Like I am impressed at what a great job our district does in figuring this out and making it, and I think a $470,000 budget deficit is impressively small, I think, for the kind of pressures that we're seeing. So I do want to acknowledge that. All right, we have our next guest looming on the television screen. So if there's no final questions for Eric, we'll move on. And we will see this back for approval at our next meeting.
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, our next agenda item is a review of our parent survey results, for which we have a zoomed in guest. Do you want to take it?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Joining us via Zoom is Darren Sievers, our consultant from School Perceptions. You've all seen Daryl, except for maybe Jay, I don't know if you've met him yet. Sorry, Darren, I call him Daryl. Darren has been with us here, and he's been in Menominee a few times with our different surveys. So he's here, he's on Zoom. Darren, you can see me, the board members and everyone in the room can see you, and I'm gonna put my microphone down by my computer so everyone will be able to hear you. So Darren, take it away.
Great. hear you all again. I'm gonna share my screen. Joe, can you confirm for me that my slide is showing up appropriately?
Yes.
Great. So thanks for having me tonight. Tonight we're gonna review a lot of data, and I tried to make it as succinct as I possibly could because you've got a lot of data. Some of that data is gonna feed right into just what you heard about the budget, because we didn't just survey your parents, we also asked for some strategic planning data and feedback from parents on the big picture things. So it's not just how's learning going, but there's some other items in the survey. So we have a lot to unpack tonight, but I try to make it as efficient as possible, and then we're gonna wrap up at the end with some kind of celebratory things about the data we gathered that you'll be interested to hear about. We did some recent research that shows some of the data points I'm going to report tonight are particularly powerful. So let's get started here. For anyone new to us in the audience, this is the flow of the presentation. It'll be similar to the staff results presentation I did this fall. Background about the company. We're going to dive right into who took the survey, our results and analysis, and then I'll pause for any questions you have at the end. So one slide about us. We are School Perceptions. We've been doing independent survey work for schools for 24 years. We've done 3.3 million staff, parents, students, and community surveys, and helped more than 1,400 districts with strategic planning and referendum planning. And there is a little bit of strategic planning in this survey at the request of Joe. He asked for some communication guidance from parents and some planning priority, programs and services priority information from the parents. So it's not just feedback from the parents, it's also guidance questions from the community angle. So we had a survey that went out in May and had a deadline, actually late April it went out. We had a deadline of May 18th. We had 414 parents take the survey, which is a 12% participation rate. We have not done the survey with you for 4 years, a little over 4 years, and actually that was before I even knew Joe or any of you. I was still working as superintendent in Slinger at that time. But to give you some context, that's down by a couple hundred parents. But it's acceptable because we crossed that 10% threshold that we really look for in all of our survey tools. As we look at the survey respondents, here's your distribution by building. And we can study the results by building. Tonight is a K-12 report. What's interesting is as you see the distribution there, and oh, by the way, it adds up to more than 100% because parents are given the opportunity to respond to questions about each of their buildings. So they oftentimes have more than one child, and sometimes in more than one building. So that looks a little distributed a bit unevenly, but is probably quite representative of building size because now, if you look at this slide, look how balanced the participation is by grade level. So that tells us not only did we exceed the 10% we like to see in totality, but we have between 11 and 15% by grade level. So this shows a nice K-12 voice from your parents across the whole system. And it's no surprise that our lowest responding group are the seniors because this is a spring survey and they're thinking about graduation and next steps. So within our survey, as I mentioned, we can study results by building, we can study results by grade level, we can study results by what programs that the parents receive. You just talked about special education reimbursement rates. We can break out your results specifically by parents of special education children, if we are so inclined. We can do it by English language learners or those that have a 504 learning plan. We can do it by race if we are so inclined. But now let's get into our findings. Those are the people that took the survey. Let's talk about what they said. Now I'm going to remind you, we use a 5-point Likert rating scale, and I won't quiz you this time. We did this in the fall. I'll just point out that what is missing is a 3. If they say, I don't know, or this question doesn't apply to me, they can click that, but they don't get any point values for that answer because they're not telling us anything. We want to measure agreement. So we ask a question, either they strongly agree, they agree, disagree, or strongly disagree, they don't have an opinion, they click it and it gets 0 points. So the true median score is a 3. We would love to have as many scores be above a 3 as possible. And here's your first look at your results 4 years from the last time we did the survey. So this is your snapshot of results. Parents, just like the staff, have 5 different indexes that the questions on the survey feed into. Parents indexes how informed they feel, how included they feel, their view of the education excellence taking place in the school, the atmosphere of the school, and then the overall experience their family is having. The good news I have tonight is that all 4 indexes are well above a 3, well above the median. And in 3 of the 5 indexes, the scores are higher overall when averaged together than the last time we did the survey. Now, while this is a snapshot, our surveys are efficient enough that I'm going to be able to show you the results of all the individual questions in a similar format to this. We'll talk about current score, we'll talk about the 4-year-ago score, and then I have some exciting news to share with you about percentage change on a number of the questions. Now, before I show you the individual questions, I want to give you some 124 responses. We get pretty excited when we see 3, 4, 5% change. We don't get too nervous when we see 1 or 2% change to the negative, and it's not statistically super exciting to see just 1 or 2% change to the good. But when we see 3, 4, and 5% change, then we know we're really over the target and things are moving in the right direction. So given that context, again, I'll remind you, same with these, this is the Likert scale we're going to give you. We had one question to start out the entire survey about communication, and that is on a great, good, fair, poor scale. And this was your distribution of responses about communication. 72% of your parents said communication is good or great. Average score on this rating scale, there's a median of 2.5. Last time you had a 2.77. This go around 4 years later, you're at a 2.85. That grew by nearly 3%. So that is nice to see. One of the questions that Joe wanted to ask parents is, how would you like to receive information from the school? Because what we're seeing in a lot of our districts is a migration back to a paper newsletter and printed out communication. Well, not in Menominee. Actually, your parents are saying, hey, your emails are great, the phone notifications are just fine, we value Parent Square, and then to a much lesser extent, newsletters online, the portal via Skyward, and then meetings with teachers, administrators. So if Joe would have said to me, okay, how do you think we should communicate with our parents based on your statewide trends? I would have said, just about everybody's asking for a quarterly newsletter from you. Well, that is not what Menominee families are saying. They're saying that these are the ways that they want to. They're definitely in the camp of convenience. Email, phone, Parent Square, etc.
Hey Darren, just real quick, I'd love to take credit for it, but there's actually some board members that wanted that question, not me. I wanted it as well, but the board went through the sample questions and gave feedback, so I think actually Michelle and Dave, and I can't remember who else, but anyway, the board deserves the credit.
Good to know. Okay. Well, Joe was my contact, so that's a good clarification, sir. Appreciate that. So now that you know how they want to hear from you, board leadership, here's what they want to hear from you. Topics of interest. Again, we talked about this was more of a strategic planning parent survey. So they want to hear a lot from you, but it's very challenging to communicate about all these things. But at a high percentage, the number one thing is how our district is performing compared to other districts. And then to a lesser extent, updates on what you're doing with school safety and security, district goals and plans, and student achievement successes. Those are all 45% or higher. And then to a lesser extent, extracurricular offerings, events, employee achievements, so on down the list. School finance and budget, just like I was listening and was intrigued to listen to as I was waiting for my turn. And then, this is a higher number than other districts who've asked this question. Your community and your parents are saying, we don't want to hear about policy updates and changes. So that tells me a robust, email summarizing board actions and things of that nature. They want to hear via email, but there's a lot of topics they would like you to cover, which is a little bit different. Typically, when I ask this set of questions, it's typically about safety, security, achievement, and then things taper off into the 20s and then down into the teens. But Menominee parents are telling you a different message tonight, not only in how they want to hear from you, but what they want to hear from you, what the topics are. So now, based on that 5-point Likert scale I talked to you about before, let's see how you did on the questions in the survey itself. So remember, I said we get excited when results change by 3, 4, or 5%. We celebrate 3, 4, 5% to the good, and we start to get nervous if they drop by 3, 4, or 5%. Well, from 4 years ago, the school board is doing what it takes to make our district successful, grew by 19%. Uncharacteristic growth, outlier growth, but celebratory growth. I do about 3 of these presentations a week. If I made this public, you probably have school boards calling you saying, well, what did you do to move the needle that far from the last time you asked the survey question? I don't see this ever. So this is celebratory. District direction, also very challenging question to move at all to the positive side, particularly the state of education we're in with budgets, with special ed reimbursement rates, with operating referendums, all the things going on in education. District direction through the eyes of parents grew by a whopping 10.4%. And then district administration, doing what it takes to make our district successful. Remember, I said 3, 4, 5% is more typical where we get excited as a company. Yes, compared to the other 2 scores, less, but still in the range where I would typically be saying to superintendents and their district administrative team, well done, this is a great growth school. So, big news there. Other school experience questions. There's a healthy culture in our school. 4.1% change from 4 years ago. I feel welcome in my child's school. 3.5% change. Again, all these well above 3 into the 4s, which is where we love to see. The school provides opportunities for parent involvement, 2.7% to the good. And then to a lesser extent, the school has high expectations for my child, more modest growth, only 5/100, but we like to see it to the plus side, as opposed to the other direction. Now we have some data that stays very flat. I'm updated how my child is doing in school. Basically the same score from 4 years ago. I was surprised by how stable some of the data is. My child feels safe at school. Very powerful question in the survey, highly valued by parents, exactly the same score as 4 years ago. The school teaches the materials that reflect my family's cultural and racial background. Identical score from 4 years ago. I'm satisfied with our school's efforts to address bullying. Very challenging question, because it is very hard to have agreement on how to deal with bullying. Exact same score from 4 years ago. If my child breaks a rule of school, they're treated fairly. Almost identical from 4 years ago. 1/100 less, 0.2% change. Nothing that we would consider measurable or significant at all. Mental health is a big worry on the minds of parents. Overall, my child is able to handle the emotional challenges of school. 1/100 less, 0.3% change. School staff treat my child with dignity and respect. 2/100 less than 4 years ago, 0.5%. I have at least one school staff member I feel comfortable contacting when I have an idea or concern. Another 2/100 less than 4 years ago. So modest changes. I have pardon me, that's a double up. I have opportunities to provide feedback to school and teachers. 0.5%, 2/100 negative. I'm satisfied with how much my child is learning, dropped by 1.3%, something to keep an eye on, but I would not be alarmed. Remember, once we hit 3, 4, 5%, then that's where it's more significant. Where you're talking 5/100ths, 4 years apart. Most days my child enjoys going to school, 1.5% negative. School facilities are clean and well kept. Okay, that's where we're starting to tickle the 3% mark, so something to keep an eye on there. I know how to support my child's learning, dropped by 3.2%. And we're seeing that with a lot of our accounts, quite honestly, because there's a lot of curricular changes taking place, particularly in the areas of reading and math. And quite honestly, it is getting harder to support their children's learning because these practices are evolving and new practices are being put in place. I used to get a lot of comments about the new math. And now there's been such an initiative towards advancing our efforts with reading that this isn't entirely surprising. And then the last question on the parent survey, as far as their school experience, my child gets help when they need it, that dropped by 3.4%. So that would be worth a conversation. I would say, well, what's behind that? So then there are other survey questions. The overall amount of homework my child is asked to complete. This is a very thorny one because just try to get everybody to agree on the right amount of homework. Well, 65% of your parents are saying, through our eyes, the homework is just right. 13% too little, 11% too much, and another 11% not really sure. How about co-curricular activities? One of my favorite questions on the survey, because I firmly believe not every child comes to school to learn. Some children come to school to participate, and learning is a byproduct of being in a club, whether it's Skills USA, robotics, or football, or forensics, science club, whatever, DECA. 66% of your kids are involved in something as reported out by their parents. And research has actually shown the higher the participation rate, the lower the at-risk factors. We also asked some future planning questions. We said, they have to live in your world. Which are the 4 areas that are most important to them? Because the budget, as you just heard, is not awash in extra money. So this gives you some feedback on, in the future, when it comes to spending, what is most important as you talk about future programs. Well, there's 24 items in this list. So here's how they rank them by priority. Far and away, the valedictorian here, life skills, personal finance, cooking, and health. I've done a lot of these surveys in communities this year, and almost every one of them has been about life skills or career and tech ed at the top. To the point where some districts are using this data to move forward with a capital referendum to put back in place a state-of-the-art health sciences and cooking lab and tech ed lab. Your parents are also prioritizing making sure that you have the ability to recruit and retain high-quality staff, which is nice to see, because that tells me that your parents are aware of the fact that that is getting harder with tighter budgets and with enrollment declines, open enrollment circumstances, budget challenges. In the end, your parents' number 2 priority is making sure you're staffed the right way. And then you have this whole list in your board packet. To a lesser extent, reading and literacy is on their mind. Mental health services is on their mind. Student discipline. Mental health and student discipline is always in the top 5 or 6 like this. So this is a fairly typical list. And then to a lesser extent, and I don't want you to misunderstand, when we see math achievement this far down the list, that does not necessarily mean math is not important. It just means that they're probably satisfied with how math is going and doesn't feel like that's a place for future focus and prioritization. And then because if you look at this, we know athletics matters to parents. Parents aren't worried about athletics for the future. That basically says, tread water, maintain what you have with athletics, and if there's new spending to be done, this is where they want you to spend. And then finally, as we wrap up the survey, overall satisfaction, and this is my second favorite question. I talked about how I love the question about student engagement and participation. But holistically, this is my favorite question on the survey because the former elementary principal, high school principal, and superintendent in me love having parents say, hey, I enrolled my kid in this school because I heard it's a great place to learn. So our closing question is on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend our school to a friend or family member? Well, your score 4 years ago on a scale of 0 to 10 was a 6.8. This time around, you're at a 7.00, so it grew by another 2.9% to the good. And now you see why we typically don't allow a neutral score on our survey questions because 17% said, I'll give you a 5 right in the middle. But what's particularly exciting about this for me on your behalf is that 28% gave you a 9 or a 10, and 52% gave you a 8, 9, or a 10. And if this were data that we're collecting for a referendum, we'd be awfully excited because the 8, 9s, and 10s are your cheerleaders. They're telling their neighbors, go to Menominee, that's a great school system. They're saying vote yes on referendums. That 8, 9, and 10 group, they're not just happy, they're vocally happy, and they're talking about you in the community. After 24 years of this, we studied the 8, 9s, and 10s and the trends at the polls. And those 8, 9s, and 10s are advocates for you. And they're telling everybody the good things that they're experiencing in your school system. The other thing noteworthy, there's not a big bandwidth of people at the bottom for giving you 0s, 1s, and 2s. This is a very typical distribution down there because there's always going to be people that want to get something off their chest by giving you that 0. A very top-heavy report, which was nice to see. So, to summary and analysis, there's 2 ways we can look at your data. What I like to look at, though, is most improvement. These are the 5 areas that improve the most. The percentage change. And quite honestly, again, I'll reiterate, we never see double-digit change on our surveys. That's very, very rare. More typical is to have 5s, 4s, and 3s. But you have some big things that happened in those top 2 questions, clearly in 4 years. The parent perception has changed significantly. We always come away with a targeted improvement, and these are the questions that regress the most. I would tell you, again, I don't typically give districts advice to worry about things with 1% change. Maybe you get into the 2s and the 3s on this list, and that's where you spend your time for further discussion. What's going on with the facilities that they're perceived to be maybe not as clean, or this could be a maintenance situation or age condition, I don't know. But also they've expressed some learning worries about supporting their child and their child getting help when they need it. So some learning areas there, but also as I go back, we talk about percentage change. Very exciting news here. Some latest research that our research team has done. We've been curious for a while, what drives this satisfaction metric? And so our research team did a study of all the other survey questions you saw on the survey and came away with a very revealing takeaway, and I'll show you that. What questions matter most when recommending a school district to a friend or family member? What are the most impactful questions? So this is our latest research. These 7 questions move the needle on that metric the most, which is the powerhouse closing question on our survey. The number 1 question that parents value, they want their child to feel safe. You may be surprised to see that the school board, doing what it takes to make the district successful, is in that next tier of the most impactful question. They want a school board that they believe in. They want the school to have high expectations for their children. They want their children to get help when they need it. Then, to a slightly lesser degree, they want a healthy culture at school. They want a district administration that they believe in, and they value nice facilities. So knowing that those 7 are the powerhouse questions that our research team said impact the survey results the most, I took that screenshot, and here's a reminder of where you stand with those 7 measures. Top one, 4.1, exactly the same score from 4 years ago. The next tier, the board score, surged by 19%. Expectations for learning up modestly by 1.3%. And further food for thought on what parents are liking to see as far as the children getting help when they need it. That is one question that regressed by 3.4%. But then also within the good news I'm sharing tonight, healthy culture at school that they value immensely, up by 4%. District administration, up by 4%. And school facilities, clean and well kept, while it's down by negative 2.8%, it's the highest score in these 7 at a 4.14. So within this latest research, you're only the second district that I've rolled this research out to. And in talking with Joe the other day, I thought it'd be exciting to show you not only what questions matter the most to parents, but how you're doing on those questions that matter the most. So that's my presentation for you tonight. I know that was fire hose drinking, a lot of data in a short amount of time. So are there any questions for me about this parent longitudinal report? Again, we followed up from 4 years ago, and we added a whole bunch of new things that at your request.
Michelle, Dale, do you have questions? Michelle? Sure. One of the, way back on slide 7, there's a question about which services children receive, and the free and reduced lunch number was 17% on the survey. If I remember, we just had our nutrition report, and our actual percentage is, yeah, so I'm curious there, and so I think the people answering this survey are underrepresenting or underreporting the population that's free to reduce lunch. Maybe it's people are not reporting accurately in the survey, but maybe it's underrepresenting them. What methods can be effective in reaching that population more thoroughly in case we're missing them in the survey?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, the district does have that data. It's not anonymous. So what we could do, there is an opportunity within our database to remind them more, to maybe send an email of encouragement to that population. And quite honestly, our head programmer does things in a manner where he is the only one that has access to the databases where we can correlate an answer to an individual email account. But we could nudge them along with more encouragement, saying we really want to hear from you, really value your input. Not saying this because you're in free and reduced lunch, but just a few more reminders there. We find the more reminders, spring's a busy time. I think it's a model time to survey your parents because they can reflect back on the year. But it's also a very busy time because sports are starting up and all those kinds of things. But we can certainly, when we do this again, give more reminders, targeted or across the whole population, quite honestly.
Thanks.
But I will tell you, that doesn't alarm me too much because even though there are underrepresented, there's still nearly 80 people in that group. And so we can still garner some nice takeaways while protecting their anonymity. We have that confidentiality cutoff, I'll remind you from the stats survey, 5 or less in any category, and then it doesn't let us study the data because we want to, it's such a small sample size, but you're going to have almost 80 parents in that group. And we could study it and see how they distribute it across grades. I can go nuts doing behind the scenes work with Joe and your administration. This is just our first look.
Thank you.
You bet.
So would that be the same then too with the 4% of the ELL families?
Was the survey sent out in various languages?
It was sent out in Spanish. And it's really neat. Our software has evolved to the point where literally the survey lands in their inbox. They click the link and there's a Spanish option right there at their fingertips. They click it and it converts instantly. Yeah, the fact that that's probably a smaller percent, maybe it just takes a few more nudges. What we are finding, if you recall, when we did the operational referendum survey, we are finding that people, were getting a higher response to paper than ever before because inboxes are getting full, of calls, ads, different things, and people have good intentions, but it gets buried under all the junk that comes in our mailboxes. And I'm fearful that sometimes people have a good intention to take the survey and then takes them a different direction and they don't come back to it. And we have research to show that. That's why I'm surprised that the fact that a paper newsletter update was so low on your list, because districts are not hearing that from their parents typically. People are wanting something that they can grip, put on the counter, and come back to later, the way our community surveys function. But that's neither here nor there. When we do this again, we could put in multiple reminders. We did 2 reminders with the survey. We could double that to 4 or 5. It doesn't matter to us, quite honestly, it's not annoying to parents, because the only one that gets a reminder are the people that haven't done their homework. Our software is intuitive, so if someone completes the survey, they don't get a reminder. So the people that complete the survey, they're out of the loop on the reminder because they've completed the survey. So it's something that Joe and I could do whenever we decide to do this.
But Emily, was your question about the 4% being below the threshold? So I think the key there is that because ELL is 4% below that 5% threshold, Darren, you would not be able to go in and identify the trends of that group.
I'm battling and answering the question the wrong way. No, 5 or less of a count, not 8%. So at a 4% response rate, that's gonna tell me that's probably, that's about 10% for it. We probably have 20 family representatives.
I had a question, to that end, when we talk about the how would you like to receive school information, and I know that was a question that, is of interest because of our next agenda item. I'm a little bit nervous that we see this overwhelming 89% of people want emails, but we have that information from the 12% of families who responded by an email invitation to the survey. and I do think that this isn't necessarily a question for you, Darren, quite so much as it is sort of thinking about this from the board perspective, like how we use that information. I realize that, and I'm not trying to undermine it, I do realize that 12% still is an analyzable sample. But I am worried if we are thinking about it for something actionable about our communications, that we would sort of keep in mind that we got these people in a certain way.
Yeah, there's definitely a selection bias.
Yeah.
As a piece of, I don't know, social or cultural commentary, I think it's fascinating that of the, what your planning priorities are, they get to select for. The top one by far is life skills, personal finance, cooking, health, etc. High quality staff next. And among the very lowest is integrate technology in their coursework at 3%, and a little bit higher is educational uses of AI at 8%, online virtual course offerings at 3%. I just think that's a fascinating remark sociologically in the moment we're in history, about what people are valuing and what they want to see more of. So.
And I will tell you to that, and our research department did study that, COVID is to blame for a lot of that view of online courses, virtual learning, and that. I think there's a time where in the 2018, 2019, people are saying, wow, I think online learning could replace in-person learning. And then we were all forced to do it, and forced to embrace it, and we saw how that went. And all of a sudden people are saying, that learning in front of a teacher in a classroom, that's a little bit underrated, and maybe we should be so quick to move to this high-tech approach. Creates isolation, et cetera, et cetera. We all know the story about what happened with COVID, but I would tell you the before and afters of COVID we have some very compelling data about what we gathered before 2020 and after 2020.
I really appreciate this kind of final analysis with the most impactful questions. And again, I think there's a lot to be encouraged by with our results. I think, you know, regarding the school facilities, like, it is concerning, I guess, that there was a large, or, you know, a sizable decrease. However, it is a very highly ranked item, right? It went down from 4.4 to 4.14, which, you know, not bad. The one that jumps out to me more is the My Child Gets Help When They Need It, and that's something I wonder what, I don't know, what that means, or is that something we want to visit at some point in the future? Is it accurate to say that if board members want to know more about, you know, drill down on a specific subset of the data, or if they have additional questions about this survey later, they can contact you, Darren, via Joe? Is that?
Yeah, when I give this presentation, I basically say, you're just getting started. If there's anything that you want me to do beyond this, this is a holistic view. And oftentimes, this is where boards will stop. But I always, you as a board are never done with me. I'll drill down as far as you need me to be a Joe. I really pride myself in that. I think that's where we really can unearth some interesting things by building, by grade level, by disaggregated group, as you talked about, second language, et cetera. So yeah, please don't be shy. I love supporting the projects I want.
With that said, are there additional questions or discussion on the parent survey for tonight? All right, then we can move on. Okay, saying goodbye to Darren.
Good night, everybody. Take care, and we'll be in touch.
Sally,
Have a nice summer.
thank you for joining us virtually.
Oh, yeah, thank you. We've gotten through the operational part of our agenda. There's some board governance, some board project stuff. Principals, lead team members, I know you guys had a crazy day with staff checking out and stuff. You are all excused. We'll see you bright and early tomorrow for our lead team meeting in the afternoon. But anyway, thanks for being here. You're welcome to stay, but you're also all excused. Thank you.
All right, so then we will move on to a report from our board ad hoc committee on school advocacy and communications. Shall I turn it over to you today? All right, thank you.
I can give you a little front porch here, and then interested in how you want to take the discussion. So we were charged with something a little smaller than what we probably gave you. So charged with coming up with something to reaction on how we might communicate the messaging and the points from the WASB 7 record straits, materials, documents, graphical communications, things like that. Made the decision to go broader than probably where we might land, because it's easier to shrink than to expand in a group like this, in my experience. So what you have is a pretty robust potential communication plan that is very open to feedback and shoot apart, no kind of pride and ownership of any of this. Other things to throw out here is, again, I want to make sure we're aligned on scope and vision of this. I think maybe as this got up to 8 pages, I was wondering if maybe it was a little bit misaligned, which is fine. If that's the feedback, that is perfectly great. Also want to make it really clear that this is not intended in any way to encroach upon anything the district is doing for communications, right? And in sort of reading this with a fresh set of eyes when when the subcommittee met last week, I could see some areas where maybe it could be viewed that way, and I just want to, and that would be valid, I think, critique of this, and I just want to make sure that that's not the intent of this, is to encroach on anything the district is doing for communications, so.
I just wanted to add the yellow highlights. Those are either things that we're concerned might encroach on the district's communications, And there are also just things to look at where, you know, we highlighted sample things, and just to, you know, remind that this is it's pretty in-depth, but it's a very, very rough draft. And we are open to a lot of feedback on it, but the yellow is just kind of things that we had touched on about, like, maybe this is encroaching, or maybe this is a good place to remind, you know, this is a sample, this isn't a finalized plan, but this is just what we came up with so far.
Michelle is the third member of the subcommittee. I just wanted to invite Michelle to add anything if you'd like to.
Reiterate, there are many areas throughout this document that we really were looking for your thoughts and your feedback and a little bit of discussion so that we can narrow things down. So we're looking for that, we're asking for that, so please let us have it.
Thank you. Any initial reactions?
I think this is an amazing initial draft, first of all, so thank you for all of that hard work. I like the idea of discussing kind of paring down our focus and in thinking about what things overlap with the district is currently doing or does kind of work on its own. But overall, I really like that. Like, there is a lot of clarity to this, even though it is, you know, quite robust.
I think the four goals stated, goal 1, increase community understanding, goal 2, strengthen community trust, goal 3, improve awareness of district value, and goal 4, establish community engagement opportunities. I think those are pretty much right on. And I think also they are in, I think, pretty much the appropriate order where, you know, like goal 1 is really, you know, helping the community understand what the financial situation for districts is. Like, that was the kind of the core of the WASB literature. And it was like very much in the weeds of that particular goal, the first goal and goal 1. And I think reading that WASB document, where I think it kind of missed is actually like the community side of things, of helping, it was a lot of fine-grained detail, but not actually about the broader picture, which I think goals 2, 3, and 4 kind of do stretch out to. I do think that there is, like, I do think that if this were taken in its broadest form, it definitely does overlap or maybe impinge on what the administration does for communication on operational details. So I think that the yellow highlights and a couple of maybe other places are things where, like, are not really like board communication work. I think, for example, staffing needs, right? That's something that the board approves a staffing plan, but it's really, you know, kind of the internal discussion of the lead team on what the staffing needs are for the staff. But in the context of school finance and understanding the challenges of what the hiring environment is like and what the market is like for teachers, that and what the additional challenges are in school finance, I think that is, you know, could be a board communication in some form.
I wonder if that staffing needs to might be related to when I was mentioning that one of the reasons we're in a sort of stable financial position is because we have sort of been eliminating along, so maybe not, like, I agree, like, at its surface level, staffing needs is operational, but as, like, how we've been keeping the district afloat by being creative and dropping off staffing, so maybe that being as part of a different, like a subset of one of the other categories.
I really, first of all, I think this is terrific, and I really appreciate the care that everyone is taking to try to not overstep or step on administrative toes or whatever, however it's been framed. That's really appreciated. However, does this have to be a board communication plan separate? or could it be a school district joint communication plan within the plan identifying, maybe scope of responsibility? Because I do think there are definitely some things that go both ways, and I think if we work together, and unify our communication, we might be able to avoid some repetition, but also, maybe maximize our effectiveness.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and having it be a joint communication plan, I definitely support that. I also, I almost think we don't necessarily need to avoid repetition. When I think about the communication channels, and some of the sample series you have listed here, I actually think there could be a lot of opportunity for reinforcement, right? So for example, Joe will often do a really great job spelling out in a newsletter, what do you call them?
School crossings.
School crossings, thank you. There's a lot of words today. So, you'll often in a school crossings, Paul will take an opportunity to really spell something out, that, the folks who read it could get a really good understanding of, and, I don't think I'm insulting you by saying not everybody reads it. And so there's an opportunity to, maybe cross-reference that, getting onto one of the, local citizen journalism sites that's working on that, doing a little collaboration, having that tie into a social media, having it tie into some kind of conversation. I think that there could be a lot of benefit from, taking multiple tactics there.
There's kind of a cliche in the comms world of 7 times 7 ways in order to get an understanding. That's not science, that's just passed down from generations of communication professors, but the idea of having redundancy in tactics and messaging, I think would be valuable, as long as we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
One of the things I remember that I was thinking earlier when I first read through this, that I really like about it is I feel like it really hits things we've been talking about for 2 years. It really covers a lot of the different priorities and concerns that we've had. So I do feel like it's really aligned with the direction we've been going.
I agree with that. I think the part of that shows that the most, in my opinion, are the core content pillars. The school finance and plain English, I think, is extremely important. I think we learned from the last referendum that simpler is better. You have more people understand what you're talking about. What public schools provide, I think, is extremely important. I didn't know half of what our school district provided until I was on the board and I saw the reports. I think that's really important for people to understand, where all of the money is going, where all the work is put in. Accountability and transparency, we talk about that all the time on this board. And then those 3 being the main content pillars, but also sprinkling in, student successes and community impacts to show and highlight how important those 3 pillars are.
Yeah, I think those 4 pillars are extremely well thought out. I really appreciate that.
I also wanted to say, I think that the sample editorial calendar on pages 5 and 6, up to 7, is really good. I think about the idea of having topics kind of phase in and out over the year, the same way our board reports do everything else, where what are we thinking about this time of year, and what are people kind of open to taking in as information at a certain time of year. I think it's just as written, it's really well laid out in terms of what to talk about, what people are thinking about. It's great.
I'd just like to reiterate that I think you guys did an awesome job, really good. I don't know how long you guys took to come up with that, but it seemed like it might have been 1 or 2, maybe more than meetings, but it doesn't really matter. But like I said, I just want to reiterate. And the other thing I want to say is about the redundancy piece. I can tell you, I'm out in the community and somebody will ask me a question or tell me that they didn't know something, and of course, me being on the school board, I'm a little biased because I pay attention and I know what's going on. But a lot of times, something could be out there 3 or 4 times and they'll look at me and they say, well, I didn't know that. So to me, redundancy is not really a big issue. I think that it's probably okay, because maybe somewhere along the way, somebody's gonna get the message that needs to hear it, that may not have gotten it a different way. So I just wanted to add that to the pot.
Yeah, I think we would all be happy if someone came up to us and was like, I'm tired of hearing what an operational referendum really is. That hasn't happened yet. It's funny that, Joe kind of brought up like the potential of this being more of a collaborative effort, between the two levels. And one of the things I was curious about, was potentially involving like student council or something. And the reason I thought that was because one of the ideas for like content sharing was like making videos and stuff, and I was like, I don't want them to be like
The videos that we would make.
right, and maybe like they would have different ideas for what that could look like, all I'm saying is you won't see me on one. But I was just kind of curious about what that potentially could be, kind of come along later as we figure out what we're doing.
We're gonna end up doing TikTok dances now.
Yeah.
And I think you also have somewhere in this document, the Mustang Messenger is included on the list. Yeah, which is another great idea.
And you mentioned some of the, I spelled this out of the draft, but you mentioned some of the citizen journalism sites that we do. I love the idea if we're open to partnering on this, and one of the reasons too is there's some tactics here that I don't know if we necessarily would have access to on our own. Like, does it make sense to set up something new on social, or can we leverage what's happening on the district websites, newsletters, things like that? Like, if we're open to it, let's leverage what we have and then just maybe extend off of that versus having to recreate some of these vehicles from scratch.
Yeah, and something I've heard observed from lots of different directions is that, like, maybe what it was like traditional social media, has been on a decline of people's actual genuine engagement, right? So thinking about how we can actually reach out to actual people and not just bots, and, so.
Sure, yeah, no, I can see tapping into Mr. Collins' journalism class they just started this year, right, or something like that, I think that opens up a bunch of possibilities too.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too, about traditional social media sites, because that was something I was kind of surprised about in the parent survey, was kind of how much lower Facebook was on the list than I thought it would be, which I think probably is a positive.
As far as next steps go, Amy, does it make sense to, so I don't know if it's fair to task the committee with this again, but I feel like this is a 9-page document, although 1 page is a table of contents. But we've identified a number of the things that the board seems to think are like really important elements of that. Would it make sense as a next step to sort of, distill this just a little bit? And then, do you want to start a conversation between admin and the committee to sort of figure out like what this would look like as a joint plan? And then we could come back at our next meeting and maybe start to flesh out the calendar for, some responsibilities. Does that seem reasonable?
For sure, yeah. The parent account part will not be a problem. Happy to, I'll speak for the committee and say I'm happy to take that on. And then Joe, however that would make sense to, who we want to plug into and how we want to do that, I'm very open to how we do that.
Perfect, so it'd be Jay, Angie, and Michelle. We have a lead team meeting tomorrow. I think I can get some good quality feedback from our admin team. And then by the end of the week, I'll be in touch about next steps.
Great. And I don't know if I said this clearly enough, but I mean, again, thank you so much. This is an amazing draft of a plan, and I can see how much work went into it, and I can appreciate that. I realize some people work by putting everything down and then pairing back. It's a lot, it's way more than, you're right that it's way more than we asked for, but it's wonderful.
I gotta use the restroom.
Okay.
I can make it.
I think you're right though, Jay, and that was a good observation, that in a group like this, it's actually easier to pare down than it is to expand.
Yeah.
So I think that's the right instinct and the right approach here. Oh, yes, sorry, Dale, go ahead.
I just want to add that I think this plan is really important and that this plan is very complete and extremely well done, just like you've all already mentioned. And I want to thank that group for putting this plan together and for all the work they put into it. And I also want to add that I think Jill's idea of incorporating the school's cooperation is very important.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dale. We can probably move on and catch Joe up, if we're ready to move on, if there's no final thoughts, on the committee. All right, next up, we have a discussion of public access to board meeting background information. So, traditionally, we have had, board docs goes out, we all see what's in the administrative content of board docs, and there is also a public content of board docs, which is, for the most part, limited to kind of top level information about the agenda items. For example, looking at today's agenda, we talk about the annual energy report. That report is in administrative content, not public content. The school nutrition report is in administrative content, not public content. What we've done for the last several years is all of those reports have become public content, usually by Tuesday morning, provided there's no board docs issues. So they do become public, but they are not public at the time we have our meetings. There's a couple of considerations here. Oftentimes when board docs gets put up on a Thursday afternoon, we as board members are seeing those reports for the first time for the most part. Which I think is part of the reason. Our board does not have committee meetings. A lot of school boards have committee meetings. Instead, we have 2 meetings a month where we're meeting as a committee of the whole. So we're seeing this information typically for the first time as a board when it goes up. Joe had the opportunity to talk to some of the other superintendents in the Big Rivers Conference, I think, right? That's the group. About how various schools do that. I took some time to take a look at what other schools post on board docs. I gotta tell you, it is hard to find a median in that, schools have very different approaches to their agenda, and so it was kind of hard to figure out what is common, because everybody's just looks so different. But, I guess I'm interested to hear what people think. I have some thoughts about, what we could change here. I could lead off with my thoughts, if anybody has an objection to that. I think there's a lot of this stuff, there is a benefit to, making public before our meetings. Again, for example, looking at the energy report, the nutrition report, that kind of stuff, like if that is available, folks can obviously follow along better, know what we're talking about. Very little of that is privileged information. On the other hand, we have things like personnel report. Obviously, I guess I shouldn't say obviously, but it seems obvious to me that we aren't going to be putting personnel information out public on board docs, but things like those reports that would eventually become public. And I think there are certain situations where I know that the administration is asking the board for guidance on things where there's less certainty. So to pick an example, I think we will look at the school calendar, right? At a certain point in the year, we're analyzing the school calendar. Sometimes there's some fuzziness on what are we gonna do about, how Christmas falls on the day of the week. What are we gonna do about the last day of school? What are we gonna do about those jumpstart days? That might be a situation where it makes sense. The board has had a chance to weigh in on it and give some guidance. I think we could probably leave that to the administration's discretion. Yeah, that's kind of an overarching summary of what my thoughts are on the topic. What do you think? You want to say anything about it?
I think the calendar example is an informative one. To me, the question is like, and there's privileged information involved in like HR records and stuff. Yeah, that's a different category. But for the journal reports and background, I feel like, the question is like, if something were out before it were discussed or approved, would it lead to like public confusion or like misinformation? I think the calendar is an example where you wouldn't want a draft version of the calendar being posted accidentally by someone as like the calendar, and then everyone's confused for the next year. It'd be like a big mess, right? But some of these things, I mean, we're not approving or correcting or updating the nutrition report, the energy report. They're informative documents that kind of keep us all up to date as a community. It's very hard to imagine a situation where there'd be any problem with those being visible much earlier, before the meeting to the public. Another example I think of is like the Add on Youth, right? I mean, I'd love to see it. I kind of wonder, like, I can't really imagine a situation where we'd be like, hey, hold on, you can't see it until tomorrow. It's a great document with a lot of, beautiful pictures and great activities. So I feel like a lot of those things they're informative, they're background. I personally don't really see a reason to keep them out of the public content, other than just kind of a tradition of letting the board kind of have a first view of them. But, we can read it quickly.
With respect to the highlight I used, I think this is obvious, but just to verify, like, those pictures have already been checked for anyone who's not supposed, anyone whose parents have asked not to have them. So it's, yeah, there's no release. Yeah, I mean, I think the only downside I can see is the potential that if there are community members who are really on the ball and reading the reports as soon as they come out and are coming up with detailed questions before the board has officially received the report. I don't necessarily think that that's a problem, but I do think that the board might have to sort of think about how would we respond to questions, right? If you start on Thursday at 5 o'clock, somebody starts sending questions about like, what the heck's up with those solar panels? I think that, my response would probably be, hey, let's wait till the board discusses it at our Monday meeting. But we'd have to I think there's a potential we'd have to use some discipline there.
Rachel, that is one of the things that I was advised by one of the colleagues in the Big Rivers, was that they understood the need, the desire of the media, of community members to have information to follow along for the meeting. But I think our board does a better job than most boards at actually preparing. It's not unheard of for boards to come and basically open their packet, it's not the old school packet, but at the meeting. I know our board doesn't do that, but you might want to give yourself some time, and I think the practice in that district is the day of the board meeting. I think by noon of the day of the meeting is when things are moved to public. That might be one thing to consider.
I want to draw on Amy's wisdom as the one who's been on the board for years and years and years. Are there other times the practice was different, and what were the results, if you recall?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about why can't you put that stuff up? This has been going on for a long time, and it always goes back to the excuse that the board has not seen it yet, so why do we want to put it to the public when the board hasn't seen it yet? I do know financials, that's one thing that I hear a lot about. People want to know what the budget looks like, what the revenue's coming in, what the revenue's going out. I've heard that there's a lot of people like to see that information. And I think that already goes, I think that because of that discussion, that may already go out. I don't remember if that is on the public or not.
All this stuff goes, unless it's protected by law, essentially, it moves public, but not till the day after the board meeting.
Okay. So that's where I would, say. The other thing I was thinking as a thought would be if you were to publish it before a board meeting. Whether it's the noon of the day of, or, earlier than that, maybe you could have some kind of disclaimer and say, this is information only. We're not open to questions or concerns until, after the board has a chance to discuss it, and then obviously you can bring your concerns, or they can come and talk at community communications, because it's something that's right there on the agenda that they've looked at. Might be a better way, maybe some kind of disclaimer. I don't know if that would be anything that might work or not.
I have a technical question maybe for Jimmy. So, is moving things into public, is that something you have to like drink them individually, or is it like a bulk process? I'm curious how much burden it would cause to you, or maybe you would answer, but how much burden it would cause to have, multiple days in a row, like Thursday and then, Friday and Saturday and then Monday and Tuesday.
I'll answer that because we kind of shared that duty. It is an individual move. It's not that difficult. It's more remembering and doing it.
Yeah, I have like very mixed feelings about this, because my first experiences coming to board meetings was as a teacher, and I was very confused that I learned what Board Docs was, and I was like, oh, that's cool, you can go and follow along, and then you actually got on and it's not any different than just getting the agenda. So it felt very, it's hard to be a part of the board discussion and following along when you don't have access to other stuff. When after becoming a board member, the idea of submitting things publicly, to public record, is, before we've had a meeting about it, feels very weird. So then I'm like, no. But then hearing you guys talk, it's like, well, I do like the idea of there being sort of this balance, because is the highlight on news, that's probably fine. Even maybe a school nutrition report. But I wonder about the report from our ad hoc committee. It's a thing is being public that people can spread around, that is not even an official thing from us yet. So I'm very conflicted about that piece.
Well, and another example is, for instance, in Hudson, they've had a very difficult few years with the closing of some schools this year. Before that, they had some significant staff problems, legal issues and such. And they've actually gone away from even streaming their work sessions. They're only streaming their regular meetings because of so much misinformation and so much pressure that the board is getting. I know that's not the situation here, but we also have to remember that not all of us are not going to be here forever either. So not that the practice can't be revisited.
And I do think, I know you were gonna say something, Jay, but I do actually want to mention that I actually don't think this is a one and done, right? I would expect that if we decide tonight to make some kind of a change, we might need to come back in a few months and be like, how's this going? What are the consequences, or what are the sort of impacts we didn't anticipate, and what do we want to, do we want to tweak this? Sorry, go ahead.
So you stole my 1 point, so good job. Yeah, no, I think the point of view, nothing's set in stone here. But the caveat of journalist at heart, I can always err on the side of thinking that we should be as transparent as we possibly can, but I totally understand the caveats of if something's still a work in process and the risk of the draft becoming the understood final, I think that's a significant caveat we should think about. But
I guess this is a question for Joe, do you think that having the direction that items that have a degree of uncertainty or a work in progress would be held in administrative content? Is that the expectation that as meetings come up, if we have questions about it, we can discuss that, but is that a guideline that would make sense to you?
I think it's a great starting spot. I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess I would recommend with the other ones that we wait, just because we don't want to run into those problems. But I think between the administrative team, myself and Jenny, I think we can kind of designate for each item which we think is in progress and what, like these reports that are, they're final. I mean, Tony's not gonna change her report after tonight, so something that could be put out.
Dale, Michelle, do you have commentary or thoughts?
No, I don't.
Yeah, you got it right down.
Okay, thanks.
I'm having a hard time hearing.
Oh, sorry, Michelle.
I have a question.
I do love it.
So currently, like after our meeting tonight, not necessarily everything in administrative content will be moved over to public.
Pretty much everything is,
Oh, pretty much everything.
yeah, usually by the end of the day, the day after the board meeting.
Well, I'll also mention, I don't believe that was the case until like recently. So that's already a big shift, in a positive way, which is great. I think that's the end of my sentence.
We are all getting tired. I have a procedural question. Does this require a policy change or a vote, or is this just something we can ask you to do?
I think this is just a matter of providing direction.
Okay.
The board certainly could always make a policy or official directive. I don't think that's needed unless you want to.
I have one technical question. What is the actual difference between public content versus administrative and administrative versus executive? How do you distinguish those?
The executive content, and Jenny can correct me if I'm wrong, I think executive is just the board and me, and I think Jenny has access for editing. That's the only thing for executive. Administrative would include the directors and the principals, the administrative team.
Thank you. I never understood the distinction.
We rarely see executive content. Like most things are in that administrative.
Yeah, closed session would be the examples for executive.
And nothing in closed session, I mean, would be moved to, well, I shouldn't say nothing, but most of what we're discussing in closed session would not be able to be put in public anyway.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Unless it was a vote
Right,
or something.
yeah, that's true. But in terms of, the vote would be there, but the background documents wouldn't be, right, because it's probably something personnel related or superintendent. Okay, does anybody have objections to moving forward with this? It doesn't sound like it, but I guess I just wanna make sure, since we're not voting.
Moving forward with it in what way do you mean?
Yes, great question. So what, the way I mean is asking to have, board reports and documents that are at least some degree of finalized, to be made public in advance of our board meetings. And I guess the question is when? Is it made public at the same time that board docs is posted, or do we build in a delay?
You know what, I know we just said that we don't need any action, but maybe to clarify at this point, maybe Rachel, you and I should draft up a little plan and bring that back to the board and actually have the board vote on it. It doesn't need to become necessarily a formal policy, but that way we know that the actions of the district are in alignment with the will of the board. So should we do that for next time, is draft something up, you and I, and
Yeah.
bring it?
Does that sound good to everybody else?
Yes, that would be my preference.
I would still actually, if you don't mind, another minute and a half. I would like to hear what people think about timing. Like, does anybody have a preference for a strong feeling? Does the content go public? Go ahead.
Monday at noon is my preference. Whenever on Monday is my preference.
Is Monday morning a reasonable ask? In terms of your, in terms of the labor required, I guess?
Most Mondays I would say should be fine, but we have a snow day Monday, or, I think it would be better just to say either by noon or before the meeting starts or something. I'd build in a little cushion.
Did you?
I was going with by Mondays.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like that. We can, and again, you can always make it
You
a
can
little
always
later.
revisit, yeah.
Well, and the wording might be better of like the same day as our board meeting, because theoretically the meeting could change.
Oh, I see, that's true, yeah. I have yet to attend a board meeting, it's not on Monday, but it could happen, it's true.
And actually, with that being said, it really probably shouldn't even be by a certain time, because you could have a special meeting at any time. Maybe it just needs to be more before the meeting begins or something like that. Or not, or an hour before,
Yeah,
a number of hours before the meeting begins.
that's a good point. That's a good point.
You could say as soon as possible, on the day of the board meeting or something, I don't know, that would be.
So if we are going to draft something for the board to vote on at our next meeting, if folks in the next couple of days have extremely strong opinions or even mild opinions that come to you and you wanna share, let me know, feel free to tell me. Anything final to say on this subject?
My only suggestion as people think about this, since this is for you and Joe, is I think it's informative to look at an actual agenda and say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no on each item, instead of kind of thinking in abstract terms, because each item has its own characteristics.
That's true. I did go back and look through those items on our last, I don't know, 4 or 5 agendas. And to me, you know, when I brought it up in the beginning, I see categories of content. We've got the financial reports, we have, administrative reports to the board, and then we have the things that are more active discussion and uncertainty. So those were the sort of, and then personnel, were the categories that kind of came to me, but. All right, I think we have some directions. On to items related to next meeting dates, board committees and reports. We have our special board meeting, remember it has been moved to June 29th. We have our July board meetings. I also am sorry to be bringing you actual content and questions, but I have had luck contacting the administration at the town of Lucas and the village of Knapp, and they have invited us to attend their board meetings in the month of July to talk about our voucher transparency and tax statements. They are both on Tuesday, July 14th. I would love to have 1 or 2, probably ideally 2 board members attend each one. Dale is on the phone. He has mentioned that he will be able to attend the village of Knapp one, where he lives, so that is nice. Is there anyone else who would like to volunteer to attend either the town of Lucas or the village of Knapp board meeting on Tuesday, July 14th? I just realized I do not know the times. I have the times in my email. I don't know them off the top of my head, so if that matters, I can follow up with you, or I can just let you know.
That's a Tuesday, you said?
It's a Tuesday, yeah. I should also note that I am hopeful there will be many more opportunities to visit other town boards, but these are the first 2 that I've gotten on the calendar for.
I can do one.
Okay, do you have a preference? No. Okay, I can also do one of them, but maybe you and I can just each take one. Does anyone have a preference to, or would like to attend the town of Lucas or village of Knapp board meeting? Either one? Can I put you down for Lucas? Okay. Great.
So now you have 2 in that, 2 of Lucas.
2 people, yeah, we can figure it out. So great, we've got 2 people for Knapp, 2 people for Lucas. I've gotten responses also from Springbrook and Tainter, but I don't have those scheduled yet. So hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have more opportunities. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for staying, everyone. Sorry, it's such a long meeting. After a long day.
Thank you.
Hey.